Hi guys and welcome back. In the last 2 years we saw an explosion of wireless and wired streamers. From entry-level to high-end material, there would be something that would catch your attention and meet your budget requirements and still offer tons of features. If you look at FiiO, they had two unusual looking R7 and R9 that didn't occupy lots of desktop space but still offered tons of features, and I believe they had the right prices. And if you are a headphone enthusiast, I believe those could be the last units you'll ever need, rocking not only a DAC section and a preamp and a streamer, but also a proper headphone amplifier. However, I still hope to see a dedicated streamer that would look more like a standard-sized hi-fi component, and that's exactly what FiiO did with their S15, and I was a little shocked when I saw its price of $999 because I believe it offers a lot for this price, and let's check it out in the usual fashion. Here is a $999 unit that does one thing only. It decodes zeros and ones into butterflies that you can feel in your stomach. This is just a DAC with a volume control. This is also a $999 unit, but besides being a DAC with volume control, it also functions as a wireless or wired streamer, as a music server if you install an M.2 SSD, insert a micro SD card filled with music, or connect an external flash drive via the USB host port. It's also a Roon endpoint, and if you are using a Roon server, then using and controlling the S15 becomes so much easier. It's also an open Android 12 device that lets you install and use any third-party app you can think of, including browsers, YouTube, games, email clients, so on and so forth. And let's not forget the massive 7.8-inch HD touchscreen that's easy to use and navigate. Even without listening to it, I see lots of value being offered here. And if I'm opening its hood, then the S15 feels too good to be true, and this is my honest opinion. Obviously, at this price, some corners needed to be cut, so this is not a fully CNC machined aluminum unit. This one uses a thinner steel case, but still I believe at this price it looks great. The build quality is still fantastic. We still have those massive metallic feet with rubber inlays. We still have a thick CNC machined aluminum front panel right here with tempered glass in the middle. It looks symmetrical and it makes sense to me, and I'd say that the build quality is still good. I'm willing to sacrifice a fully CNC machined unit for a much lower price, and that's what we're getting with the S15. Moving on to controls, we have two rotary switches on its front panel. One will help you navigate its UI, and also it's an on-off button, and the second is the volume wheel. In the middle you see a big touchscreen and several touch buttons surrounding its display. You also have a USB host feature, I believe, around here, and the USB DAC, USB Type-C that lets you use this one as a USB DAC. Unfortunately, we do not have another USB connection to use this one as a USB DAC. This is the only one, and I see it as a drawback because, in a hi-fi system, I want to have all my cables on its back, not on the front of the unit. Taking a glance on its back, it becomes clear to me that FiiO didn't spare a dime on the inputs and outputs. I'm glad to see an I2S output because that's my favorite digital output to an external DAC, and I'm also glad to see an HDMI ARC output. The cinephile in you will surely appreciate it. There are several digital inputs that lets you use it as a dedicated DAC. We have the M.2 SSD slot that connects to the main unit via a provided USB Type-C cable. But if you don't want to fiddle with SSDs, you can always install a micro SD card or a USB flash drive and then listen to music via FiiO Music app. Its UI is complex, and learning all of the functions will take you at least one day. I recommend installing all of your streaming apps first. In my case, I used Tidal and Qobuz, but you can also install Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, YouTube Music, and many other apps. Unfortunately, FiiO is not providing a dedicated app to control every feature of this unit like Eversolo does with their DMP-A6 and AA units, but we still have several ways of controlling the S15. The easiest way is via its touchscreen if it stays in your vicinity, for example in a Hi-Fi setup. You can also pair the included remote control and then use it from afar. The nice thing with this remote is that it works via Bluetooth and not via infrared, so you don't need to point the remote in the direction of the S15, and it works flawlessly even at 10 meters away from the unit. And finally, you can launch the FiiO Control app and mirror the user interface of the S15 on your smartphone. Unfortunately, this feature is not working so great. It's a bit laggy at the moment, but hopefully with a new firmware update and with a new version of the FiiO Control app, the screen mirroring feature will work as intended. And if you are a Roon user like I am, then controlling the S15 becomes so much easier. Just insert an Ethernet cable, enable the S15 from your Roon app, and from there you have a total freedom over your music collection. If you still like listening to your offline music files, you can of course do this as well via the FiiO Music app, and if you like a different music playback app, you can install and use that one since we have an open Android 12 platform. FiiO also provides a 10-band parametric EQ option that lets you adjust the gain, the bandwidth and the Q factor, and then save the preset for future use. But once you engage it, the sound feels by a hair less transparent and not as resolving anymore, and it's up to you if you want to sacrifice just a bit of dynamic range for a parametric EQ control. As you know by now, I try to open up all of the cases that are coming for a review, but after removing every single screw that I saw on this unit, I was unable to remove this steel case. I'm not really sure what is holding this one, so I'll be relying on the pictures that I found online. I was surprised to see a 35-watt linear transformer. Usually for units having so many features and this price, you don't see a linear transformer, the MPA6, but I'm glad to see one like that in here. We have 4 Elma-Silmi capacitors used for filtering and also beefy voltage regulation stages following, and about a third of the internal circuitry is occupied by the power supply. That's a good start already. FiiO used the latest and the greatest AKM silicon, more exactly the AK4499EX, together with the complementary Delta Sigma modulator from AKM, so that is already a good sign because you can see those in plenty of much more expensive dedicated DACs of today. We also have some sort of hybrid IV conversion stage and also output stage consisting of several OPA op-amps and several discrete components, so again that's a pretty good sign. The usual Accu silicon femtosecond clocks are also included. We have 2 of them. This one also can work as a Bluetooth receiver and offers all of those fancy codecs, but I don't see the point of using Bluetooth when we have such an amazing streaming option available. The Android section and also the streaming part are being controlled by a Snapdragon 660 system on chip. That's an older CPU, but you really don't need the powerhouse to control its UI and all of its features. It also has 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of ROM memory, out of which I believe 46 are being offered to the user, but of course you can expand that storage via micro SD cards, via this M.2 SSD slot, and also via external flash drives. Alright everyone, now let's talk about the most important part of the S15, sound quality. And since I wanted to know everything that it has to offer, I use this one as a Roon endpoint, as a streamer, but also as a DAC. I followed this one with an Ultima 2 preamplifier by Chord Electronics and also by 2 monoblocks. Those are Ultima 3 preamplifiers, and also by the Rado TD 2.2 speakers that you can see behind me. This is a reference sounding setup, I believe. It's very resolving, incredibly resolving. Probably the most resolving that I've heard to this date, because I'm trying to compare it, with other things that are coming for a review. So I need to have a reference setup to which to compare something that is coming. So I would know exactly what is changing compared to our reference setup. First of all, I want to mention that FiiO is finally moving away from that, ultra-linear, almost clinical sounding R7 and R9, but R7 was definitely more so, and While I enjoyed its feature set and it was, super packed, so many tech in such a small device, I didn't enjoy that much its sound. I believe it was super technical, it was clean, resolving, and I'm sure many of you, me included, like those things, but it didn't connect me with my music. It was not what I was expecting, and with an external power supply it was better, but with the stock switching mode power supply, the R7 was too lightweight for me. The bass was not punchy, the mid-range was not sweet sounding, and overall it didn't connect me with my music. It was more like a flat and 2D sounding to me as well. But this time around FiiO is trying to do something else. It's not going on the same path, and I remember meeting them at the Munich High-End show and talking a lot about the K19, about the R7, and about the new direction which I believe FiiO should go. And they finally started going into the right direction with the S15, because this one is no longer just ultra linear, flat, boring and 2D sounding, but there is definitely a little bit of sweetness in here, so I can finally connect with my music and finally my tunes started talking with me. S15 definitely is not following a similar path, and that linear transformer and those AKM silicone, as you can see, velvet sound, and of course that hybrid output stage had something to say, because definitely the sound is right now weightier, there is simply more emotion, there is just a bolder sound overall is coming in front of you, and not everything is oozing only from my speakers, but I have a blanket of sounds. So definitely it's more enveloping, it's bigger sounding, it's slightly sweeter sounding compared to what they did before. Yes, in my opinion, it's better sounding compared to the R7 and R9. The sound is not exactly as smooth as a Tennessee whiskey or as sweet as a strawberry wine, but it's definitely going into the same direction. And while I believe the DMP-A6 by Eversolo is slightly more feature-packed, offering you Tidal Connect options, Spotify Connect, and also a dedicated app, this one is definitely at least one level above sounding compared to the DMP-A6. I believe breathing into direction of the DMP-A8, because I believe it's almost on the same level, but not exactly on the same level, while costing 2 times less. S15 is definitely smoother sounding compared to R7 and R9, but it was not exactly a smooth rider compared to a high-end streamer, more like a wild cowboy in the first 50 hours of use. But after that period, it was definitely a little less aggressive and more, easier going sounding. So it definitely sounds a little better after a few hours of use. The tone and timbre is not on the same level with world-class DACs, but there is definitely more texture, more meat on the bone compared to R7 and R9, so I could definitely not only hear those notes in the bass, in the mid-range, but also feel those, because definitely there is more energy oozing from the bass and mid-range, and the sound is simply a little bit more powerful compared to a lighter weight presentation of the R7, for example. Its DAC section was not overlooked or ignored, and I believe it plays comparatively with DACs, standalone DACs costing between $500 and $700 US. From the ones I tried, it reminds me a lot about the Topping D70 Octo and also about the FiiO K9 AKM. It still doesn't have the resolution of $1,000 US DACs. There is still a short gap, but don't forget how many features this guy is still providing. If you have a hi-fi setup or a head-fi battle station and the sum of all the components sits at around $10K US, then I believe the S15 will feel right at home, and it could easily replace a dedicated streamer and DAC, especially if Roon is your thing. Dynamics weren't really the craziest. I believe it was gently a little bit pressing the brakes in terms of dynamics. It was not exactly playing on the same level with $1,000 US DACs, but at the same time it was not really gentle or super smooth to not enjoy my wacky music collection. Rock and electronic music still delivered plenty of energy, there was plenty of oomph, so I believe it's still more energetic sounding compared to Eversolo DMP-A6 and R7 by FiiO. R7 was actually not that impressive with the stock switching power supply in terms of bass delivery and mid-range, but that seems not to be the case with S15. There is simply more life happening in the bass and mid-range. So this is not just a bigger R7 and R9, this is, I believe, a better sounding unit altogether. The sound staging capabilities are above average on this unit. I would give it around 7.5 out of 10, so there is still plenty of stereo separation, there is plenty of air in between the notes. I believe it still plays better compared to DMP-A6 and R7 in this regard, that were more 2D and flatter sounding. Just don't expect that world-class holography or out-of-head experiences with headphones or just the sound coming from outside your room. That is not happening with the S15, but it's still decently good in this regard. Later on, I wanted to bypass the internal DAC section of the S15, so I connected my Rockna Wavedream signature via that I2S input. Don't worry if you don't have such a digital input on your DAC. You can of course use the coaxial optical AAC output of the S15 and connect your DAC, so yeah, you can do that pretty easily. I used Qobuz, Tidal, but most of the time I used Roon because it's so much easier to control everything with your smartphone than using its remote control or that screen mirroring feature. If you have an Apple device, you can use AirPlay, so again, sky's the limit, you can control this one in multiple ways. Sure enough, with the Rockna Wavedream, the sound changed quite a lot, and I won't lie, the change was substantial. But let's not forget that the Rockna is considerably more expensive. The sound was considerably bigger, dynamics were crazier, everything was better. So if you have a better DAC, of course, you can bypass the internal DAC and you can use your own DAC pretty easily. And that's what I'm recommending doing. Of course, you can use the internal DAC. I believe it sounds just fine, but if you want to further elevate the sound, you can do that pretty easily. Later on, I also connected some other DACs like Tapping Centaurus, Tapping D90 Discrete, SMSL Raw Product 1, and in every situation the sound was gently changing depending on the DAC that I was using. So clearly its streaming section is quite transparent, and of course depending on what DAC you'll be using, the sound will be changing as well. Now let's talk about some nitpicks and some drawbacks that I found with the S15. The first nitpick is that we have just a single USB Type-C connection to use this one as a DAC, and it's located on the front panel of this unit. In my hi-fi setup, I want to hide all of my cables. I don't like looking at the cables, but that would be a challenge if I want to use its USB DAC feature, because the cable will be in the front. Secondly, we don't have Spotify Connect and Tidal Connect, and for some of you this can be a major drawback. I use Roon, so for me that is not a big deal, but for some of you Tidal Connect seems like the most important feature, and sadly we don't have that on S15. Thirdly, that screen mirroring feature is right now not working as intended. The aspect ratio on my smartphone is looking really weird, and the interface is lagging on my smartphone. It's not working so great, so maybe with some future updates on the app or with a firmware update it will work nicer, but right now it's not working as intended. And lastly, FiiO didn't develop an app specifically for the S15 like what we have on the Eversolo DMP-A6 and DMP-A8. We have that FiiO control app, but right now it's not very impressive. We don't have so many features to choose from, so that app is a little bit limited compared to other streamers. So these are basically the only nitpicks and drawbacks that I see on the S15. Wrapping up, if you can get past all of the drawbacks that I just mentioned, you don't care that much about app control, Tidal Connect, you are a hardcore Roon user, Apple user, or a Headfire, then there's a lot to like about the S15. Seriously now, just look how many features it offers and think about the endless possibilities an open Android platform offers. You could store your entire offline music collection on it and stay off the grid, and there would be still extra features worth exploring. And let's not forget that this is not just a versatile streamer, Roon endpoint and music server, but also a good sounding DAC. Some manufacturers are charging a similar price for a DAC-only unit, while others are charging twice as much for a similar sound, but for a slightly better feature set. Ever solo. Even in this state, I believe S15 has a lot to offer, and I will recommend this one to you. Okay guys, this is it. Thanks for watching. My name is Sandro, and I'll see you very, very soon. Cheers!